This meeting to order. If you'll please rise. Invocation by Supervisor Gould, and then the pledge led by Supervisor Lingenfelter.
Please join me in prayer if you choose. Lord, we thank you and praise you today, Lord, for this great country and this great county, Lord. Please give us the wisdom and guidance to Lord. Lead it in the way that it should go, Lord. Give us additional mathematical skills today, Lord. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to be discussing the 24-25 budget, and I think we'll begin with the county manager.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Let me start by welcoming you to the fiscal year 2025 budget workshop. And as usual, I thank you for the opportunity to serve Mojave County and its residents in this capacity. I would like to start by stating that this year, fiscal year 24, has been a challenging budget year to say the least. During this seemingly long year, we experienced multiple difficulties. To name a few, we struggled to achieve long-term financial solutions. We faced high employee turnover and related vacancies. We also experienced some low employee morale. However, on the other side of that, we also achieved multiple successes. To mention a few, we are advancing over $30 million of ARPA-funded projects, and specifically high-speed fiber in Kingman and water projects in North County for District 1, Gary Keith Memorial Park in Bullhead and Davis Camp renovations for District 2, water line replacement in Lake Havasu and Mojave County fiber optic infrastructure for District 3, sewer line extension in North Kingman and water systems upgrade elsewhere in District 4, and power line extension to Mojave Valley Landfill and Desert Hill Fire District for District 5. Just really to name a few projects of an extensive list of projects that are going forward. And we are still working to program the remaining $10 million of ARPA funds. Additionally, we have advanced a robust capital improvement program in transportation, water infrastructure, and facilities that is funded through federal and state grants as well as county funding. We have kept up with and delivered mandated, essential, and discretionary services to county residents throughout all the departments and county functions. With that said, I am also pleased to report to you today that we present a balanced budget for FY25. I honestly attribute this outcome to a proactive approach to budgeting by staff, a timely action by our board, and department heads and leaders from every department understood the challenge, remained disciplined, scrutinized every budget request, and deferred budget needs that were not critical. Throughout this budget year, our priority and much of our efforts have been laser focused on compiling a balanced budget with two key components in mind. One, sustain county functions and provide efficient services. And two, minimize employee turnover and related impacts. Employee turnover has been and remains a major concern. The loss of knowledge and valuable experience while being short-staffed, is a significant challenge in itself. You combine that with a heavy normal workload for each department and add tens of millions of dollars of projects funded with not only ARPA, but also with federal and state grant funds, and that becomes very demanding of human resources and potentially unsustainable under those conditions. It will threaten our ability to efficiently carry out our duties and to successfully deliver these much-needed projects, as well as deliver critical key services. So, our approach for FY25 budget has been basic and straightforward. Compile a balanced budget plan, period. Provide the budgetary means necessary to deliver adequate and efficient county functions and services. And third, offer decent, compatible compensation to employees, coupled with fair benefits and a rewarding, productive work environment to attract and retain valuable employees. Finally, throughout my entire career, I have recognized and believed that employees are the backbone of any organization, and I sincerely believe that even more today. Our county employees are our most valuable and necessary asset. I will end my remarks with this reminder. Our budget challenges remain with us going forward into future years, and our pursuit of a stable, long-term solution to financial stability remains unachieved. I sincerely thank you for hearing my thoughts and concerns. I will turn it over to Luke Mournian, Chief Financial Officer, and his team to present the fiscal year 25 proposed budget to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Elters. Good morning, Chairman Angus, board members, staff, and members of the public who are in attendance or watching remotely. I don't want to take a whole lot of time with my comments, but I do want to thank the board, first of all, for the timely actions that you all took early in fiscal 24 to cut some expenses, and as well to staff for the actions that they have taken throughout the year to date and will continue to do so moving forward to cut expenses and to really, as Sam said, take a hard look at whether something could be deferred or whether it was something critical that had to happen this year. I would also like to give a big thank you to my budget staff, Sonia and Judy, as well as Don Golson, who also contributed in a substantial way to getting this budget before you, as well as implementing the new ClearGov budget software. So this is the first year we've used that. It is also the first year that we're working with a digital budget book. And so we will continue to expand on how we use that software in future years, but it would not have happened without those three that I mentioned. And then lastly, just thank you for the opportunity to serve as the Chief Financial Officer for Mojave County. If we get the slides up on the screen. Thank you. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'll give a kind of summary of the budget outlook that will include both the state budget issues as well as county. We will also review a list of all of the new initiatives and capital requests, not just from the general fund, but from all the other funds. And we will discuss the projected general fund balance at the end of the current fiscal year, as well as the outlook over the next 5 years. And then we'll cover just very quickly, some options that the board has and the timeline leading up to final budget adoption in late June. So I want to start just discussing some challenges and opportunities that the county has before it. As Sam mentioned, we do have a somewhat alarming trend in the number of employee resignations over the last 5 years. The state has its own budget issues. The latest from the FAC, the Financial Advisory Committee for the state, is that we've gone from a projected $2.2 billion deficit over the next several years. That was what they projected in January. They had a meeting last week. They've reduced that to $1.8 billion. It's still significant, but it is moving in the right direction. We do anticipate that there will be a little bit further slowdown in the state shared sales tax revenue. I'll just remind the board that 2 years ago, that year-over-year growth rate was in the double digits, in the high double digits, close to 20% in some areas. It has since slowed to the low single digits. We're anticipating anywhere from 2 to 3% year-over-year growth next year. So it's quite a contraction. Inflation, while it has decreased, still remains elevated, still is having an effect on the county's finances. And just the recommendation that we continue to look for ways to move away from a single year budget focus and begin planning longer term. We do have some opportunities in this proposed budget on how we compensate employees and recognize them for their efforts. And we are projecting, due to the actions of the board and staff, significant budget savings at the end of the current year versus what we budgeted. And so that should result in a substantial end-of-year cash balance in the general fund. So that's all good news there. Specifically with recruitment and retention, I just want to take a quick look at this slide. This is the annual number of employee resignations over the last 5 years. And I'll just point out that 76% of county departments average greater than 10% turnover due to the resignations. So this does not include transfers between departments. It does not include terminations. It does include any time an employee chooses to work elsewhere or retire. The retirement piece is a much smaller piece of these numbers. And then the average turnover due to resignation across all of the county departments is about 16.5%. Moving on to the state budget, as I mentioned, they've reduced the projected deficit over the next 2 years down to $1.8 billion. That change from $2.2 billion in January is due to a number of factors. The first one being that there's been a decline in the number or in the amount of individual income tax refunds that were issued. And then there has also been a 12% increase in the collection of insurance premium tax. As I said, growth in sales tax collections has been sluggish. It's slowed dramatically from several years ago, particularly in the retail section. And so that $1.8 billion deficit that the state is now projecting over the next 2 years is $650 million in the current year, about $675 million in fiscal 25, and then there's also close to $400 million in what is designated as ongoing one-time expenditures. And so these are the appropriations that you see each year that are designated one time, but then they seem to continue year after year. And so that's what that $1.8 billion is made up of. I will, there's a number of issues facing the county stemming out of the state's budget. And so the first one I just want to mention real quickly is probation funding. The state continues to debate whether they should continue to fund their portion of our probation budgets. It's about $600,000 impact to the county if they do not fund it for fiscal 25, so that would be a hit to the contingency. In recent years, the state has been taking a 1 year at a time approach. They have funded that with one-time revenues, including ARPA monies. So it's something that we are keeping an eye on. There's also 3 specific current year legislative items that we're keeping an eye on. SB 1578 dealing with court-ordered treatment. That could have up to a $200,000 impact on the county next year if it passes as written. HB 2098, this is a bill that governs the process for the sale of tax liens. as it is written, it could have a chilling effect on whether investors choose to purchase tax liens. And so the fiscal impact really is TBD. If it passes, we'll be keeping a close eye on that in conjunction with the Treasurer's Office to see what the impact is to next February's tax lien sale. And then this one is going to the voters in November, HCR 2023. This basically provides a process for property owners to apply for a refund of a portion of their property taxes if the county or another municipality, such as one of the cities within the county, is proven to have a pattern of non-enforcement of some certain code enforcement. And so that will go to the voters in November. It's very vaguely written, so it's very concerning. CSA is opposed to it. One thing that passed last year as well that is impacting our current year budget is SB 1197, and this basically eliminated most court-ordered fees for juveniles, and so we're anticipating about $100,000 impact in fiscal 25. As I mentioned, inflation continues to have an impact on our budget. It's decreased. It peaked in June of 2022 at just over 9%, but I just want to point out that just because inflation has come down does not correlate to a decrease in the cost of goods. It just means that the price increases are slowing. And so this chart in front of you from University of Arizona just shows that since February 2020, the prices for most goods have gone up about 24%. So a substantial increase over the last several years, and something that will likely remain with us for the foreseeable future. When it comes to opportunities for compensation for county employees, one item that is included in the proposed budget is a 3% cost of living increase for all county employees. This, if adopted, would go into effect July 1st with the beginning of the fiscal year. It would increase each step within our salary schedule by 3%, and the cost of the general fund is about $1.6 million. I will mention that this revisions to our salary schedule will be needed regardless of whether this initiative passes, because the state's minimum wage is increasing in January of 2025, and so in order to be compliant with that increase, we will need to make some revisions to the salary schedule on the lower end of the pay scale. A second item related to compensation is we would like to fund PTO buyback for the second year. It was a success in fiscal 24. We had about 22% of employees participate in that. In fiscal 24, we budgeted, being the first year, we budgeted for 100% participation, just not knowing how many employees would choose to participate. For fiscal 25, we've reined that in significantly, and so the cost of the general fund is anticipated to be about $275,000 versus the $1.1 million that was budgeted for the current year. And that includes a nominal growth rate, expecting that participation will increase slightly as the number of years that the program is in place goes on. And then lastly, we will continue to offer performance-based pay for employees receiving satisfactory performance evaluations, and so they can qualify for an annual 3% merit increase. I will say one thing that we changed this year is how we are budgeting for those annual merit increases. And so we really fine-tuned how that is done, and that resulted in about a $750,000 budget savings year over year, just in dialing in how that is budgeted for. When it comes to capital improvement, I'll start off just saying we have one project that is very near to completion, the animal shelter. It's expected that the county will be able to move into that new facility by the end of this month. So that's a long-waited for event, and so we're happy that that is drawing to a close and that will be open for business soon. And then with fiscal 25, we do have programmed capital costs countywide is about $53 million. That includes about $5 million of county managed ARPA projects. But when it comes to the general fund, we really have two major projects: Law and Justice Center Phase 2 at about $10.5 million, and the Legal Services Center at about $12.5 million. This is including $3 million additional for each one of these projects. If you recall, last year we upped the general fund contingency to $15 million from $9 million, and so that $6 million increase was based on engineers' cost projections for these two projects. So $23 million between those two. $17 million of it is already programmed. The other $6 million would primarily come from reducing our general fund contingency reserve from $15 million down to $11 million. As far as timing on those two projects, if they are approved and greenlit, the Law and Justice Center Phase 2 would advertise in July, contract be awarded in September. It would have about an 18-month build time. Legal Services Center is currently ready to go out to bid. It would be 10 to 12 weeks for procurement to award a contract, and that also has about an 18-month build time. And then the other project that I have on here is just the jail reach out reentry facility that is funded with state funds. It's about $6.3 million, and it anticipated that will begin construction early next fiscal year with a 12-month build time. On the revenue side, we are projecting auto lieu tax to be roughly the same as the current year. As I mentioned, state shared sales tax, we are anticipating a further slowdown in the growth rate, but it will be a nominal increase over the current year. And then delinquent tax collections, we are adjusting those revenue projections downward a bit from current year, and that is basically just aligning our projected revenues with the current year's collections. A big success this year was the tax deed sale put on by the clerk of the board in conjunction with the treasurer's office. You can see the statistics on the slide in front of you. 96% of the parcels that were taken to auction sold, and that will contribute just over $1.5 million to the general fund, primarily in fees and delinquent interest. I just want to take a minute to just say that this is really, the deed sale is a great example of multiple county departments working together to achieve something for the county. The clerk of the board, the treasurer's office, the recorder's office, the assessor, even development services, who gets inundated with requests about the zoning of parcels that are on the auction block. And so I just want to give a big thank you to all of those departments, for everybody that had a piece in making that a very, very successful sale this year. When it comes to tax rates for next fiscal year, we are not recommending any change. So the general fund primary property tax rate would remain at $1.7547 per $100 of assessed value, and then the library, flood control, and TV districts also would remain unchanged. One item that the board asked for last year to bring back was some better metrics for just what sort of services the county was delivering, and so we brought back that mandated, essential, and discretionary breakdown of the level of services. And so for fiscal 25 and the proposed budget, we see a net increase of about $300,000 in mandated services. That is comprised of some decreases and some increases. On the decrease side, the treasurer decreased overall expenses by about $200,000, and the jail, the sheriff, and including the jail, they had a number of substantial items in there on the decrease side. One being that the lump sum contributions we've made to the public safety pension fund is resulting in about a $1.2 million savings in fiscal 25, and those savings will continue in future years. So that is a very large impact on the budget. On the increase side, we've seen the courts have mandated increases for the judges and other elected officials throughout the county. Election costs are up in the current year because we have elections this year. That's a cyclical thing. And then, as I mentioned before, we're budgeting for a 3% cost of living increase, and the county's contributions for the state healthcare system are projected to go up by about $560,000 in fiscal 25. I do want to mention that the gathering of this service level breakdown is not something that is facilitated by the ClearGov budgeting software. It was not something that was facilitated by Munis either. This has always been done externally via spreadsheets. It's cumbersome. It's something we would like to get away from as we continue to focus more on the new budgeting software, and would like to just point out specific items, maybe the legislative impact that have come through each year going forward. Another item that I asked departments to include in their budget this year is the effect of contracted services on each department's budget. And so looking at fiscal 25, we see about a $280,000 increase to the general fund. This is primarily sheriff and jail related increases to their contracts. On the sheriff side, we had about $135,000. That included just over $60,000 for the deputies' body cameras, that contract. And then on the jail side, we had about $100,000. Most of that was due to an increase in the contract for inmate food and healthcare services. And then countywide, the entire county, about a $715,000 increase in contracted services. And so, again, that's partly due to inflation. It's partly just due to the nature of some of the contracts have built-in year-over-year increases in them. Additionally, we looked at the impact of utility increases on the general fund. You can see it's just over $300,000, primarily the bulk of that in the increase in the cost of electricity. So the fiscal 25 budget for the general fund just for utilities is a little over $2 million. Moving on to our 5-year outlook. And so I broke this down on the top row here. You can see our recurring projected structural deficit. It is about $6.4 million in fiscal 25. And the total deficit for fiscal 25 is projected at just under $13 million. About half of that is non-recurring. That is programming the additional $6 million in capital. And then in fiscal 26 through fiscal 29, the difference that you see there is repayment of the loan that we took from the landfill fund to make those pension paydowns for public safety. And so those repayments are about $800,000 in fiscal 25, and then they range from 1.1 to 1.3 million over the next 4 years or so. This slide I am going to spend a pretty good amount of time on because this is the overall 5-year outlook, and it's a reasonable question to ask, how did we get from last summer projecting an $18.5 million deficit to this year where you can see it's green lit for fiscal 25. It's, if we're using a stop traffic signal analogy, we've got a yellow light in fiscal 26, and then it moves into a red light in 27, 28, and 29. And so the fiscal 25 projected surplus is due to a carryover of what we're projecting to be a surplus fund balance at the end of the current year. Now, how did we get there? We're actually projecting about $18 million in savings versus budget. And as I mentioned before, some of that is due to the actions that the board took. Some of it is due to actions that staff have taken. I'll break it down into recurring and non-recurring items. On the recurring side, we're almost $14 million net positive budget savings. And a small piece of that, about $1.5 million, is on the revenue side, with revenues coming in higher than projected, primarily property tax, and then the PILT monies that we receive should be about $300,000 more than what was projected, based on the update that we received. And then on the expense side, we're about $12 million lower than the actual budget that was approved last summer. The bulk of that, almost $8 million, is in personnel, and of that $7.7 million or so, we attribute about $6.1 million of that to vacancy savings. So while it is helping us with our fund balance and it's helping with that, dealing with that projected deficit, that is, as County Manager Elters mentioned, it's coming on the backs of the employees that are left in those departments that have been perennially short-staffed. And so, good thing overall for the budget, but it comes at a price. On the non-recurring side, we're about $4.5 million to the net positive. This is directly related to the actions that the board took regarding the sheriff substations. We had $4.5 million general fund monies programmed. The sheriff received $9 million in state funding, and so the board pulled back that $4.5 million. And so that's how you get to the $18 million savings versus what we were discussing last summer and into the fall in the special budget meetings. And so looking ahead, we still need long-term solutions. As you can see in that 5-year projection, we are still showing a deficit in the coming years. I want to just list some statutory options for the board. This is not a recommendation, just options that the board has via statute to diversify our recurring revenues. And those options do include a county excise tax or formation of a number of different special districts that statute does avail as options. As far as staff goes, we will continue focusing on reining in expenses, looking for ways that we can reduce expenses, looking for ways we can continue to generate savings versus what is budgeted. So that takes us into the summary of all of the new initiatives and capital requests. And again, these are not just general fund. This is countywide, everything that departments submitted in their budgets. We'll say that the message that was given to the departments leading into the FY25 budget formulation process was, if at all possible, to keep initiatives budget neutral, to really look at whether something was critically needed in fiscal 25, and if it was not absolute must to have, to defer that to a future year. Other items that would be accepted as new initiatives were if they were statutorily mandated, things that had been previously approved by the board, or as I mentioned, those contracts that have built-in year-over-year increases. Those would also be accepted. A change that we did make in the budget approach from prior years is that departments, for non-personnel related items, we gave them a 5-year average of what their actual expenses had been, and asked that if at all possible they could stay at or under that 5-year average. And I'm happy to say a lot of departments really responded to that and made some significant efforts at cutting their costs. When it comes just to an overall summary in the general fund, we have about $3.5 million in new initiatives. Roughly half of that is the cost of living allowance. As a matter of comparison, last year the new initiatives for the general fund were $3.3 million, and that did not include any sort of cost of living allowance. And we didn't have any capital requests come through on the general fund this year, and that speaks to how seriously the departments took the message they were giving and the direction that they were giving. We have a net reduction of about 1.5 full-time equivalent employees. In comparison to last year, we reduced headcount by about 28 budgeted positions. That was largely on the sheriff and the jail side in exchange for the significant compensation increase that they received. They froze a number of positions. So as I mentioned before, the cost of living allowance, this is proposed for countywide, would take effect July 1st. About $1.6 million to the general fund, $1.1 million to all the other funds, and would require some revisions to the county salary schedule. One item that came up during some discussions earlier this year, Supervisor Johnson asked what would it cost to potentially expand our PTO buyback program? And so we ran the numbers on that, looked at several different options in conjunction with HR. And what we landed on, we have two different groups of employees. We have employees hired before January 1st, 2016. They have a different accrual rate for PTO than employees hired after January 1st, 2016. And each of those different employee groups has a different threshold of how much PTO they can carry over at the end of the calendar year. And so we looked at, what would be a reasonable expansion, a cost that the general fund could absorb. And so what we arrived at was if an employee has greater than 2/3 of what their annual carryover limit is, and so for the pre-2016 group, they can carry over 900 hours each year. For the post-2016 group, they can carry over 300 hours. So if they are maintaining more than 2/3 of that max carryover balance, they would be eligible to purchase back an additional 20 hours of PTO via the buyback program. So this would make their max hours 60 instead of 40 that the rest of the employee population is eligible to buy back. All the other criteria for the program would remain the same, and so those include the employee must have received a satisfactory evaluation on their most recent annual performance evaluation. The amount of PTO they use in the current calendar year has to be at least equal to the amount that they are buying back, because we want to encourage employees to take time off and get some rest and recuperate. And then they still must maintain a balance of at least 80 hours after buyback. And so the net cost for that would be $150,000 to the general fund. And so absent any objection from the board today, we will include that in the tentative budget that will be brought before you on June 3rd for potential adoption. I'll just take a pause and see if any of our board members would like to comment on this.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Mournian? Don't see any.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Are you looking for questions on your last statement or on your entire presentation?
Specifically on the PTO buyback and potential expansion.
Thank you. I'll hold my comments.
Okay, thank you, board members. So when it comes to department-specific initiatives, the Sheriff's Office has about $117,000 requests. They want to reclassify and provide market pay adjustments for all of their public safety dispatchers. This cost would be shared between the general fund and a contribution from the Parks E-Race division. They also utilize the same dispatchers, so they're willing to shoulder a portion of the cost there. The county attorney's office has one initiative, and this is to reclassify 4 attorney positions. The cost would be about $47,000 to the general fund. These 4 attorneys are already providing a pretty significant amount of oversight and supervision, and so the county attorney would basically like to compensate them for that. It's basically taking a mid-level manager approach to where they're each overseeing a specific area and focus of the county attorney's office. They are dealing with some of the most difficult retention and recruitment issues countywide, maybe second only to law enforcement. And so that is the request that comes from the county attorney's office. When it comes to the courts, we just have one request, and this is within the conciliation court. This is to basically just change the funding source for one position. It's a net decrease of $8,000 in general fund support. The recorder has one new initiative. They would like to add a part-time office assistant position into the career progression series. There's no cost associated with the request in FY25. They just want to make sure that every employee within their office has the same career progression opportunities. And then there's a capital request to purchase a new archive writer. This is a piece of equipment needed to comply with the state record retention standards for permanent records, and that comes at a cost of about $115,000. Treasurer's Office is requesting a two-step market adjustment for their systems administrator. It's about $5,000 cost, but as I mentioned before, overall in their budget, they've brought their costs down by almost $200,000 for fiscal 25. Elections Department would like to purchase replacement e-poll book systems. This is not a general fund cost. This is sourced to their equipment replacement fund. Current system's 10 years old, and they tell us this will allow for more efficient voter check-in at the polls, so that's something that later or in fiscal 25 will definitely be needed with our elections. In the Finance Department, I am requesting one additional accountant position. It's at $81,000 cost in fiscal 25. When we reperform the cost allocations for the next fiscal year, that cost will get sent out to the various departments, so it would be budget neutral in future years as to our budget. I'll just take a minute to say that our head count at 14 right now is the same as it was in 2001. It's fluctuated down and only in the last year gotten back up to the head count of 14, but we've seen a significant increase, about 15% increase in payroll, in accounts payable, in our budget transactions, just in the last 5 years. ARPA has about 200 hours a year of additional work in our office, and on the financial reporting, so when you think of audit and the county's annual financial statements, those accounting regulations are issued by the GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Bureau, and they have about 100 standards that we have to comply with, and roughly 50% of those standards have been issued since 2000, and it represents a significant amount of additional workload in the department.
Supervisor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Luke, when you said that's budget neutral, but you're claiming it's budget neutral to Finance Department's budget, but it's not budget neutral to the overall county budget.
No, and that's why you are correct. It is an additional cost that will be recurred in future years.
My question is, we've went through some other items that claim budget neutrality. Was that budget neutrality to the overall county budget or just to the department that was spoken of?
Those other ones are truly budget neutral to the county.
So we should probably use a different term then if we're shifting a cost from one department to the other.
Point taken, and just for transparency, that's why I did mention that it is the cost allocation that gets revisited each year.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman.
In the HR department, we have a two-part initiative, one involving personnel reclassifying 5 positions. In exchange, they will be freezing 1 position that is currently vacant. They also would like to purchase an additional onboarding module for the NeoGov software. This should streamline the new hire process, and that's something that the length of the application, interview, and onboarding process in government is significantly longer than in the majority of the private sector, and so we'd hope that this would help assist with our recruitment issues. And so overall, between these two-part initiative, net savings to the general fund is about $33,000. Procurement and central services, again, they would like to freeze 1 vacant position, reclassify a supervisor position to a different type of supervisor position that basically combines the duties of procurement and the central services. And so it'd basically be a new hybrid position that has oversight in both sides of the department. And then they would also like to create a new technician series, reclassify 3 positions into that series, represents net savings to the general fund of just over $40,000, and on the central services side, about $22,000 in savings. Our IT department has a couple of requests, one for network switch, $75,000, and then video management system at the sheriff's office, cost of $42,000. Both of these systems or pieces of equipment are basically aging out and need to be replaced. Our public health department is requesting 2 additional employees. These would be grant-funded staff. They would like a senior programs coordinator that is focused solely on the Lake Havasu City senior programs, and then an office specialist that can fill in as needed at any of the 3 senior center sites. They've had some issues with staffing as well, and so this would give them basically a body that can go wherever is needed when somebody calls in to a site that is already short-staffed. And there would be no impact to the general fund. This would be purely grant funded. Our animal shelter has 2 requests. One is to reclass the shelter supervisor from range 11 to range 15. The other is to provide market adjustments to 2 leads and 6 technicians. Net cost is $38,000 to the general fund. Then our library district, they have capital requests of about $350,000, network data switches, HVAC replacements, 2 vehicle replacements, and then repairs to some concrete repairs in Bullhead City and Lake Havasu. And so you can see the various costs there on the slide. And again, that's not general fund. The library district is its own taxing district.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Back to the library. Why does the library administration need vehicles?
That, I believe, it's for the administration, so I believe those vehicles are used to travel between the various sites.
They need 2 of them. Okay. That's all, just as my question.
Do they not already have vehicles now?
Excuse me?
Do they not already have vehicles now?
And these are replacing current vehicles that are aging out under the county's mileage and age requirements.
So we don't pick that up under the vehicle replacement program?
I don't believe so. I believe these are department owned.
Interesting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So they're not part of the vehicle replacement?
That's my understanding, yes. There's a number of vehicles countywide that aren't part of that program that have been, either purchased with special funds, non-general funding.
Is that, I'm sorry, you still going to President?
Well, I guess we set that program up so they wouldn't have this problem going forward, where people paid the rental fee every month, and then when it came time, they got the new vehicle out of the money they'd already paid. But I guess maybe that's just something we'll have to look at. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is that because it's a separate taxing district with their own?
Yes.
Is that it?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair and board members, 2 things. One is the library is an independent, autonomous taxing district, and the other is they follow the same vehicle replacement policy related to mileage and age, but they own these vehicles. They have owned them for an extended period of time, and they're just replace them when they're justified for a replacement, but they continue to own them, and we have not changed that setup.
Okay, any further questions? Hearing none?
Development services and flood control. This is a very large department with a lot of funding. Again, the flood control side is a separate taxing jurisdiction. There's about just under 15 million in capital requests. These are non-general fund. All of these would be sourced to either the department's fund balance or to grant funding. And so I listed a couple of the major ones here. Grace Neal Channel, Phase 2 and 3, to the tune of almost $6 million. And then some jointly funded projects. We have Central Street Crossing at Short Creek. We have the Mojave Infiltration Basin and Bank Street Drainage. And I'll just say that, those are joint projects that include state and federal funding as a funding source. When it comes to environmental quality in our landfill, there's about $3.1 million in capital requests. These are primarily to meet the post-closure requirements at the Surbat and Mojave Valley sites. There is $250,000 budgeted for permanent power. That includes, there's also some ARPA funding that's in there. That request was originally about $600,000 in ARPA funding. It was reduced down to just under $500,000. And then at the Surbat landfill, specifically about $500,000 in dealing with the on-site tailings and dike repairs. In our roads department, and this is HERF funded, we have a request for a two-step market adjustment for an office specialist, and then some minor equipment purchases of radios that would be used in outlying areas to ensure that there's adequate communication when they're doing road maintenance operations. Basically areas where cell phones don't work very well. There's also just under $3 million in capital requests. Number of vehicles, the list there goes on. I'll just point out that for the 3 motor graders that are being proposed, the cost there is inclusive of a $450,000 trade-in credit that they receive via manufacturer program, so $150,000 per each motor grader. On the engineering side of Public Works, we have new initiative. They would like to put into place a permit fee, a new permit fee for oversized or overweight vehicles. This is in line with fees that are charged in other Arizona counties. It is expected to generate a nominal amount of revenue each year, about $5,000. They also would like to purchase some drone software. And then capital requests include purchasing a workstation for plan review, and then some funding for minor land purchases if they are needed. In our traffic control, just a couple of requests, new vinyl cutters for the sign shop, and then capital requests to replace a work truck, and then to purchase a truck-mounted message board as well. And so those would be used during any sort of repair or other traffic operations throughout the year to put up a visible sign that's very portable to warn motorists of what's coming up on the road in front of them. On the equipment maintenance side of Public Works, again, another initiative to create a career progression series for the welders within the department. And this would be the last. This would make all positions within the department be part of a career progression series. And then also capital requests to purchase some Toughbook laptops with modems. The department would use these when they're sending out technicians to do repairs in the field. They will aid with diagnosing what the issues are and speeding up the repairs. Fleet services requests include two reclassifications, along with the freezing of a vacant office assistant position. That would net out to $6,000 in savings. And so the reclassifications is a storekeeper and an automotive mechanic, and then a capital request to purchase a heavy-duty vehicle lift for the shop. And this is a biggie, the vehicle use, $2.2 million for purchase of 27 replacement vehicles, including 14 for the sheriff's office. They would also reduce the overall motor pool by 1 vehicle. This continues a trend they started this year to kind of right size the size of that motor pool, and so they will transfer 1 van to the animal shelter for their use. On the facilities side, we have about $765,000 in facilities improvements. This is primarily HVAC and roofing repairs, so ongoing maintenance of the facilities. And then there's about $500,000 budgeted for jail major maintenance, and again, roof, HVAC, kitchen equipment, and some backup generator repairs. And I will point out that Public Works is one of the departments that did a really good job of looking at their expenses and saying what is critical that we do now versus what can we defer to a later time. The The fairgrounds has just one minor capital request. They'd like to get some better quality folding tables and chairs. This is the sort of thing when you're renting out a facility for a wedding or something like that that's a little higher end, needs appearances matter. This would help facilitate meeting those needs on those type of rentals. And then moving on to our water districts. So market adjustments for 6 staff that operate the I-40 and GVID systems. Those positions include utility service worker, water system operator, and water system operator senior. Those market adjustments in total in FY25 would be about $24,000. Capital requests in I-40, $360,000. This is one of the requests is reassigning an excavator from GVID to the I-40 water system. And so they would basically purchase that from GVID for $39,000, which is the book cost for that piece of equipment. And then they'd also like to purchase electrical cabinets and some related equipment for 2 of the well sites. There's also a variable frequency drive that was purchased in fiscal 23, and now there's been a significant delay, and the equipment is finally here, and so they need funding for the installation of that. And then on GVID, it's about $120,000 in capital requests. Cathodic protection system, and then SCADA equipment. The SCADA equipment is used for the remote monitoring of the system. And so those total about $120,000. Our Parks Department and reclassification of a couple of different positions, and something I mentioned previously, E-Race is going to contribute $55,000 to the Sheriff's Office Public Safety Dispatcher Initiative for the market adjustments there. And then there's a grant match requested as well for $10,000. Up in Wallapai Mountain Park, we have a market adjustment for water systems staff. It's $8,000. It would be split with Davis Camp. There's a request for grant match for the ongoing, a grant match for the application for the OHV program grant. So a $10,000 grant match potentially to get just over $3 million in grant funding, and those grant funds would be used to construct the Sawmill RV Park up in Wallapai Mountain. And some projections that we got from the department there is that once that RV facility is completed, there's a high demand. They expect it will generate anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 in additional revenue for our park system. Moving down to the river to Davis Camp, we have, again, that market adjustment for water system staff, and again, that's split between the 2 parks. There's reclassification of a park ranger and then replacement of one aging HVAC unit on one of the rentals down there. So that covers all of the new initiatives and capital requests. Any questions before I move on?
Any questions for Mr. Mournier? I don't see any.
So we'll move on to recommendations for general fund balance for fiscal 25. The recommendation is a $37 million fund balance. We also recommend decreasing the contingency balance from $15 million to $11 million. As I mentioned before, that decrease would largely be due to programming the additional capital for the 2 projects that we went over. I will just say that this target fund balance, we recalculate this each year. It's based on the overall budget. It approximates about 3.5 months of operating expenses, and so that takes us from July 1st into the fall when the property tax revenues start showing up. That ensures that we have adequate cash flow to maintain all the county operations. And we base these recommendations on the best practices that are put out by the Government Finance Officers Association. So those recommendations, take into account a number of different factors, including the cash flow, and then specific risks for the county. And so two of the risks that we are, considering here is the uncertainty in the state's budget and whether that ends up translating into potential sweeps from the counties. It's something that the state has done in the past. And then on the contingency side, the $11 million recommendation is about 8.7% of our operating expenses. And the best practice recommendation is anywhere from 2 to 10%. And then you make adjustments upward or downward based on risk factors that are present. And so at 8.7%, it's still, that 2 to 10% is the minimum recommended reserve. So even if you're at 10%, it's still, if you have significant risk, that is still considered a minimum recommended reserve. Again, the state budget, the legislative items that I went over earlier and how those could impact the county, when you add up the ones that we actually have concrete values for, it could be up to $1 million impact that would come out of the contingency reserve. And again, that potential for state sweeps is also there, and that has been significant in the past. And then lastly, the third risk factor that we consider is just the lack of diverse revenue on the recurring side for the county. I've really covered a lot of the information on this slide. So again, it's just factors that go into the recommendation for the fund balance. So when it comes to options that the board has, I just want to cover some assumptions that went into all the recommendations that we're making today. We're assuming that actual spending will remain below budget, especially on the personnel side. It's unlikely that we fill all of these vacancies in the next year. I wish that weren't so, but if history shows us anything, it's that we have a long-term problem there in recruiting and retaining talent. We're also assuming continued stable property values. That one is definitely something we can rely on based on the data from the assessor's office. Our assessed property values are significantly below the market value, and so we should continue to see increases in valuation over the next several years. And then, again, on the state shared sales tax revenue, we're assuming that it remains relatively stable with some continued slow, year-over-year growth. Nothing significant, but we are not projecting a decrease in the year-over-year revenue that we receive from the state. And so overall, we do still expect inflation to be an issue. When I put these slides together a few weeks ago, we were expecting, saying through calendar year end of fiscal or calendar 24. If you've been paying attention to the latest comments from the Fed, we'll see how that goes. But, you go back to December and the number of rate cuts that were expected were a lot more than what is being discussed today. And so something we're keeping an eye on, but we expect inflation to continue to be a factor. And we're just overall taking a conservative approach, trying to err on the side of caution due to the level of uncertainty that's out there. When it comes to our property tax rate, like I said, we recommend maintaining for fiscal 25 the current primary property tax rate. It's 53 cents below the max allowable levy of 2.2863. For fiscal 25, 1 penny of levy equals just over $250,000 in tax revenue. Maintaining that same levy rate will result in just over $2 million in additional revenue, and that's because of the increase in the property valuations. The county still has almost $14 million in additional levy capacity available to it. We have estimated, and I stress estimated, the FY25 TNT rate. We do not have confirmation from the Department of Revenue yet. We expect it soon. They say by the end of the month. The reason I'm just cautioning this is that you can see that TNT rate is actually higher than where our current property tax rate is. This is the first time in many years that the TNT rate has increased. And so I will report back to the board as soon as we get the confirmed number from the Department of Revenue. We calculated it based on the formula that's been used in the prior years. It should be accurate, but until the state confirms it, I don't want to rely too heavily on that. And so, as Sam mentioned in his opening remarks, we still do have a structural imbalance long term. Our recurring expenses continue to exceed our recurring revenues. The continued use of budget savings or one-time revenues for balancing, again, same message I gave you last year. That's not the recommended strategy. We need long-term solutions. We've had a consistent growth in the county going back all the way to the late 1970s. We've gone from 49,000 residents to over 220,000 residents. That trend is expected to continue. I think the data from CSA is that by 2050 they're projecting 360,000 residents, I believe was the number. So we expect continued growth. That continued growth translates to an increased demand for services by the residents of the county, and to meet that need, we need staff. We need revenue to pay staff, and so long-term solutions are needed. And just real quickly to go through the different options that the board has, as we've presented, we're projecting a significant fund balance at the end of the year. We'll use that to cover the recurring deficit next year. Other options would be an increase to the primary tax levy rate, authorize an excise tax, or a special district formation. And those options have been discussed in great detail in the meetings that we had over the fall. And so I won't spend any more time there, but I'll just say that our least productive options are the ones that only address a single year. And so if we could move towards looking longer term, it would be a positive trajectory for the county. So just a quick timeline for leading up to our final budget adoption is scheduled for June 17th, and so that would put us before the end of the fiscal year for the first time. And then the only item that remains after that is the adoption of the tax rates, which can't take place until August. It has to take place before the third week of August. And just to conclude, the overall fiscal 25 budget countywide is $561 million. That's almost $20 million less than last year. It includes about $132 million in general fund operating expenses, $53 million in capital projects. Our property tax and state shared revenues continue to make up about 85% of general fund revenues. And so when I say we need more diversified revenues, if something were to happen to either one of those revenue sources, it's going to have a magnified impact on the county, because those are the only, it's such a high percentage of the overall general fund revenues. And then the last thing, I'll just remind everyone again before we get into any Q&A or hear from our elected officials and department heads. Again, this is our first year using a digital budget book. And so I just want to thank everybody for their patience, for their flexibility, and their willingness to learn how to use the new product. For the public, all of the information that we're discussing today is available on the web in a browsable format using that software. There is also a downloadable PDF we already pulled down from the web. It is on Finance's webpage. And so if you choose to download it from the ClearGov software, it takes about an hour to download the entire thing. You can just go to our website and get it in a matter of seconds. So hopefully that is helpful to everyone. And with that, I will conclude.
Well, thank you for that. I want to thank you and your staff and all the departments and all our employees for doing a very good job and being very conscious of our fiscal situation. And with that, I'll ask the board if they have any questions for Mr. Mournian before we move on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you got a question?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Luke, last year we were told we had an $18.5 million budget deficit. I remember going through several budget hearing meetings that told me we couldn't close this gap. You need to raise taxes, Supervisor. What happened?
So, I can go back through the list, but essentially, we had some higher than projected revenues, about $1.5 million, and then we had some about 12 to 13 million in budget savings where expenses did not come in as high as what was budgeted. As I mentioned before, the most significant piece of that was almost $8 million in personnel savings. About $6 million of that is attributed to vacancies. So when we're putting a budget before you each year, we have to budget for those vacant positions that are needed. And so when they don't get filled, there we have a significant piece of savings. The actions that the board took, pulling back the funding from the sheriff substations, that was almost, it's $4.5 million. The efforts of the departments to rein in expenses, whether that's, spending less on office supplies or, bringing down whatever stockpile of paper or envelopes or stationery that they might have, before they order replacements. There's been a number of actions that departments have taken to really try and rein things in. Another big piece, even in the current year, is looking at, like, if we had a purchase planned, is it critically needed in this year? Can we defer it to the next year? Can we defer it several years? Can we make do with what we have rather than replacing things? And so there's a lot that went into that. I wish I had a crystal ball and could anticipate every one of those factors, but we don't. But that's the list of the big ticket items that got us to where we are.
I want to commend you and commend your staff and the department heads and their staff for bringing us this budget. This is what I asked you to do back in September, and I'm glad that it got done. I think we did a disservice to the county and a disservice to the public by putting out that we had an $18.5 million deficit. I think it was hard on the employees because they all felt that their jobs were at risk. I think it stifled hiring new people. And I think overall it was just unproductive. I've been going through the county telling people that deficit is not a real deficit. So now I have to go through and tell people that I was right, that apparently it wasn't real. I was pressured by the board to raise taxes. I was pressured by staff to raise taxes. I don't work for the board. I don't work for staff. I work for the voters. The voters are the ones that hire me. The voters are the ones that fire me. If I have to push you to get you to do these kind of things, I'm more than happy to do it. But I want to commend you for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gould. I'll just add that, when we present the numbers, the budget, what is budgeted is a discrete value, and as we move through the year, things do change. When we look at the 5-year projection, we still do have a structural imbalance, and so while the actions that were taken this year and the actions that we will continue to focus on keeping expenses down, we still are projecting a structural imbalance and a deficit in coming years. And so, it's a good thing that the actions that were taken over the past 9 months or so have borne a lot of fruit and have gotten us to the point where we are projecting a fund balance that can cover the deficit, the recurring deficit next year, and most of what is the year after that as well. But long term, we still are projecting a deficit.
Madam Chair.
Purely from the numbers standpoint.
Anyone else? Any other board member?
Madam Chair. Again, I just want to say thank you to everybody on county staff for what you've done to bring us this budget this year. You mentioned it. We don't operate in a vacuum. Mojave County consistently is growing with new residents, new visitors, and to be able to provide the amount of programs and services that we do with the staff that we do, with the resources that we have, I think it's pretty phenomenal. Again, I do think that structural deficit is still looming out there. We're not going to be able to dodge it for another 5 years. So hopefully we'll be able to find some new solutions.
Supervisor Bishop?
Supervisor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Director Morian. It's good that we've come to a balanced budget for this year, but I say that cautiously because we still don't know what the state budget is going to do, because they are also in a critical state where they may be shifting more of their cost onto the county. And do you know how soon we will know what that's going to do to affect our budget?
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop. That's a great question. The latest that we heard was a week before last, that basically no state budget actions were going to be taken until after the Financial Advisory Committee met. They met last week. I haven't heard anything further on a definite date that we might hear something, but hopefully it's soon. If they go right up to their absolute deadline, it's possible that we adopt a final budget before the state does. But hopefully that's not the case.
Okay, and I think it's great that we were able to have some savings from the sheriff's capital and improvements because he got grant money from the state. That helped a lot. The sale of our delinquent tax properties, that's a one-time deal. I think we sold almost all of them, so next year we can't depend on that again. And we still desperately need to build a morgue. That was put on the back burner indefinitely, but there's things that are coming up in the coming years that are still going to be a challenge. And I understand that when you present us with a proposed deficit like you did, the 18.5 million, that was a shocker to us. We didn't realize that was a possibility, and I think because of our amazing employees and directors, everybody buckled up and pulled back. And unfortunately, we lost a lot of really, really good employees because of job insecurity because of all this. But hopefully, the grass is always greener, and I hope they'll come back. Because we certainly, most of the employees that left for better pay or better jobs, I hope they miss us and I hope they return. So thank you so much for your presentation, and I look forward to hearing from the elected officials and the directors.
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a couple.
go
you
ahead.
do?
Go
No, go ahead. No.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what is this deficit you're skipping over? How much money is projecting we're going to be in the hole?
So if we get the slides back up on the screen, go back to it. So the top row here is looking at our recurring revenues and expenses. And for fiscal 25, we have about a $6.4 million deficit on that recurring side. You can see it increases slightly over the next several years. And so if we continue to basically use whatever cash balance there is at the end of the year to deal with that, at some point we're going to get to the point where the cash balance is not sufficient to deal with that deficit. There's not much of a difference between that total deficit and the recurring deficit. As I pointed out earlier, the majority of that difference each year is just the repayment of the $10 million loan we took from the landfill fund, the general fund. used to pay down the PSPRS pension liability. That was a great move, and thank you to the board for approving that last year. Like I said, it's going to result in $1.2 million in contribution savings on the county side in fiscal 25. And, over the next 10 years, that $10 million landfill loan that we took because of the low interest rate and because of the savings over the years and the pension contributions, it's going to generate far more than the $10 million cost, as well as the interest that we're going to pay back to the landfill. So, but long term, we do still have that structural deficit.
Okay, so you're saying the budget you're proposing today with these numbers here will still be 6.4 million in the hole?
I'm saying that, yes, when it comes to recurring revenues that we're expecting to come in next year and what we have budgeted for recurring expenses in the general fund, there's a $6.4 million gap where the expenses are higher than the revenues. And so we're covering that gap with the excess fund balance that we will have at the end of the current fiscal year.
Okay, and we got through this year by freezing positions, freezing travel, stopping building. Are you saying that we are going to go ahead and do those things this coming year?
My recommendation, Supervisor Johnson, is that we do away with the hiring freeze. As we've discussed, there's a lot of vacancies around the county in the general fund, and that is placing additional stress on the people that are currently filling positions for the county. We would like to do everything that we can to fill as many of those vacancies as we can. And then when it comes to the travel freeze, overall, what is budgeted next year for the general fund for travel is about $500,000. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not certainly $500,000 is a significant amount of money. But in the grand scheme of a $132 million budget, it's not a big piece of that. And the effect that has is that if there is training that is needed that is not available remotely, if travel budget is not available or travel is not allowed, then some of that training goes by the wayside. And so we have employees that need training. They need to keep up with their professional certifications. They need to keep up with advancements in technology. And so if that training goes by the wayside, we end up with a less productive workforce, and it's really a self-defeating type of issue.
I don't see that we stopped any of that, but I guess where I'm a little confused now is that, much like Supervisor Gould and the rest of us last year, we had a supposed deficit, and we took steps to modify that. And from the numbers I see, what we did is what got us to this year to have enough carryover from not hiring people and the freeze to balance this year's budget. And what the staff is telling us, it's over. We just go ahead and pass this budget and everything is fixed this year. I'm confused somewhere.
Supervisor Johnson, I'm not saying that everything is fixed this year. But with the fund balance that we are projecting at the end of the year, due to the actions of the board, due to the actions of staff during this year, we do have a significant amount of carryover that would allow us to get through next year. And when you look at the slide for fiscal 26, that projected deficit is under $3 million. It's entirely possible, and probably more likely than not, that we continue to experience significant vacancy savings through fiscal 25, and so that yellow projection on the slide, to go back to that traffic signal analogy, does turn to green by the end of fiscal 25 for the next fiscal year. As I said, we're going to continue to try and curb expenses, but as I see it, the travel freeze isn't going to have a significant impact there. If we maintain a hiring freeze and we continue to lose people because they're stressed out and they're carrying the weight of the vacancies within their department, certainly it will generate even more in vacancy savings, but in the long run, it's not going to be good for the county and providing services to the residents of Mojave County.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, while we're on that subject, Director Morian, do you recommend that at this time we're safe to do away with the travel freeze and the employee freeze? Is that what I'm hearing you?
Supervisor Bishop, yes, that is what I would recommend at this time. And you know, another tool or mechanism that we put in place immediately after the fiscal 24 budget was passed was requiring a quarterly budget to actual analysis to be performed by all the departments. And we continue to do that. The plan will be to keep that moving forward, regardless of whether we are projecting a deficit or not. It's a good budgeting tool. It keeps the focus where it should be on you know, being fiscally conservative and really keeping a close eye on the expenses within each department. It also provides for some very good conversations when a department is facing an issue where, you know, maybe their expenses are getting out of line. It provides kind of an early warning signal for that. It gives them time to respond to that before you're at the end of the fiscal year and they're requesting a transfer from the contingency reserve. You know, if you notice that at the end of the first quarter or midway through the fiscal year, there's still time to adjust. And so my recommendation would be that to the board would be to, you know, moving into fiscal 25 to remove the travel ban, remove the hiring freeze, and we will continue to keep a close eye on those expenses. And like I said, using that quarterly analysis as one mechanism to do so. And if we see warning signs, we will certainly take action to address them.
Okay. With that being said, I appreciate this conservative approach that we all have, but I would like to have this placed on the first meeting in June on the agenda at the regular Board of Supervisors meeting for discussion about the travel ban and the employee freeze.
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop. We can certainly do that.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. We didn't talk about, starting in January, every elected official is going to get a $20,000 raise. We didn't talk about that, but that's been figured in, I assume.
Chairman Angus, yes, that is included in the budget that is presented to you. The only item that we have not included is the proposed expansion to the PTO buyback. And as I said before, unless there's significant objections today, we do plan to include that in the tentative budget for June 3rd.
Well, I'll ask the board now, if anyone voluntarily willing to give back their raise if they're going to be here next year? Didn't think so. Okay.
So Supervisor Angus, since you brought that up,
Yeah.
can a board member turn down their salary? I don't know how you would do that. I mean, you could
I can
donate
do it
your
too.
salary after you receive it, but Director
Yeah.
Morian,
Yeah, you could.
can a supervisor say, no, I don't want this extra pay, make it go away?
Supervisor Bishop, I would defer to our legal department on that. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, we'll study that. We'll
I
put
know
that on
I
next
make a lot
agenda.
of donations with my salary, but you know that's my decision. I don't know that you can.
I think you can, just
Mr.
like,
Elters, do you know? Can you just say I'm above taking a salary and I'm going to do this job for free? I don't know.
it's just like Trump. He would donate his salary to a department within government. So this is not the discussion. It's kind of just a joke.
I guess you brought that up. You know, you're going down to the legislature now, and the legislature this last year, while they get $24,000 tax-free, our legislature's got $77,000 tax-free in travel and per diem. So how are we justifying, you're talking, they
don't
made
think it's
more money
77.
on that than we made as a salary as a board.
I'm not here to debate this. I mean, I had nothing to do with that. If you want to talk about that, I would suggest the legislators that are still there, and if I'm blessed enough to be down there, we will talk about it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question for Director Mornian. With the PTO buyback suggestion recommendation, do you have an estimate of perhaps what percent of the staff are going to take advantage of that?
Supervisor Lingenfelter, that's a great question. So when we brought that program before the board last year, and fiscal 24 being its first year in place, we ended up having about a 22% participation rate, and that's countywide, not just general fund. And, you know, one of our main points of reference for how we're budgeting for that this year, in discussion with the finance manager or finance director for Bullhead City, they've had a PTO buyback program in place for, I believe they're going on the 5th year. And what he told me was that each subsequent year that it was in place, they've seen a small uptick in the participation rate. And so there's a number of factors that probably go into that. You know, you have brand new employees in year one of the program that maybe haven't built up the PTO balance to be eligible to participate. Or you have employees that have been here a longer time, maybe have a higher accrual, but they've been the earn and burn type of employee that is taking their PTO almost as soon as they earn it. We expect that some of those year one or year two employees will say, hey, this would be nice. The timing of the payout is around just after the new year. So it's a good way to, you know, if they've overshopped for the holidays, to pay off those credit card bills. But essentially it's a mid-year cash infusion into their bank account. And so we would expect that they've seen their coworkers maybe getting a bigger paycheck, and that they would choose to save.
Not to interrupt you, but you said 22% last year. Is maybe 25% this year?
So we're budgeting for about 30% this year.
40%. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
That's my question.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
may I jump in for a bit?
sure.
I did really want to reflect. I'm compelled to share some thoughts with the board and maybe bring back some thoughts from last year. And as I started my comment this year by saying I am pleased to present to you this year a balanced budget. Both Supervisor Johnson and Supervisor Gould picked up on the fact that we do not have a balanced budget going forward, not even this year. We're balancing it using excess fund balance to plug in a hole. So the truth is, our expenses as of this year exceed our revenue. That's a fact. What's other fact is that we told you last year, when we really did not know, because we wanted to be truthful and transparent, that we had forecasted a deficit. And there was a deficit. There is a deficit. $14.5 million of that $18 million deficit was $1.5 million in revenue for the deed sale, which you heard about. $5 million was taken away from the sheriff's substation and placed back into the general fund. $8 million in salary savings. It breaks my heart to think that we talk about salary saving as a good thing. We are burning employees out, and it's unsustainable. And so to project ahead and say we're going to continue to have this salary saving, it can't happen. We are, just this last week, we had a handful of departures. And it's a one-way, it appears, no matter how hard we try. As I told each and every one of you when we had our one-on-one meetings, we are losing experience that we're not able to replace. We're paying as much to hire employees or more than what we are losing, and we're losing their experience. I understand when we told you the truth that we had a deficit projected, that it would have impact. And it did have impact. It affected morale and affected probably people making decisions to join the county or not join the county. But that was the truth. That's our job, to tell you what we know, and for the board to make decisions as you see fit. Notice we did not make any recommendation this year for any revenue increases. We did not think the time is right for that. We understand the world that we live in, and we felt it would be best to use the fund balance to plug in the gap and present a balanced budget than to attempt to increase revenue to make them even with the expenses. So forgive me for being so candid and so forthcoming, but it's really important that we all stay on the same page and that we look for long-term solutions that best serve our residents. And I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. I think we understood last year what you were talking about. I've been here now for 12 years. It's my 12th budget. And every year, the projected deficit is a lot less when it comes in. And that's a lot of reasons. One of them is the incredible growth in our county. You look at the cities, everything is booming. And I expect, and going in, I mean, just in Bullhead alone, we're talking about billion-dollar developments coming in. So, that is always something to think about. But, I understood what you were saying. This is not, you go year to year, but it's going to all catch up at some point. And that's what we were trying to fix last year. I thought, personally, in a way that was fair to the taxpayer. Not to get into it, but that wasn't meant to be. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job going forward. I just have a couple of little things. In 2014, when I first came in here, our tax rate was 1.8196. Today, 12 years later, it is 1.7547. In the years between, it had kind of leveled off at 1.9696 for several years. And then we used the TNT number for years that, during COVID, where we thought that we didn't understand how the economy was going to play out. We wanted to help the taxpayers, so we lowered it to the TNT rate, meaning you were paying the same to the county, doesn't include the taxing districts, but to the county, what you paid the year before. And I'm very proud of that. But now it's I only brought this up because it was interesting to hear you say that the TNT rate was higher than our tax rate. Buster Johnson, you've been here for a while. Have you seen that before? Yeah, it's just it's kind of a mistake. Well, we'll see about that.
We'll see when we hear from the Department of Revenue.
Another thing I am very worried about are these unfunded mandates from the state. There are some bills. There is a ballot initiative that I think is going to pass, and it is called one second.
HCR 2023.
HCR 2023. I've got to read you what it is. The title of it. Where is it? Here it is. Arizona Property Tax Refund for Non-Enforcement of Public Nuisance Laws. Everyone's going to vote for that. And that is an unfunded mandate that has the propensity to really be a huge problem for our departments, for our courts, for our sheriff's departments. And we're watching that. And they did that like in the dead of night. We did not. We heard about it early and we were against it. And then next thing we knew, it's on the ballot. There was no real discussion. I think like ACO and CSA didn't even know that it was moving along. They said it was done in a way they haven't seen for a long time. And that's infuriating because it was done for a specific reason in Phoenix. You know that they'll pass laws that to fix a problem in Phoenix, but the unintended consequences down the line to the rural areas is just devastating. I'm very worried about that. Hopefully it'll get tied up in court forever, but we'll see. And just on a personal note, I'm very happy you are replacing the chairs at the fairground. Those of us who were at the fairground Saturday night, those seats were just horrible. It's just very uncomfortable, so that's a very good investment. All right, is there anything else? No? Supervisor Bishop.
We're still going to hear from the elected officials.
Yeah, sure.
And so could I ask the chairman to request the ladies on the front row to take their conversations into the lobby.
That is a good idea.
It's very distracting because this is very serious and we're trying to pay attention and they're having some kind of a
Do you think you can
social event.
control your laughter and speak? Listen, excuse me. One more like that and I'm going to ask for you to leave. All right, so, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To address a couple of comments. By holding the tax rate the same, this budget is that's a $3.2 million tax increase. So to say that it does not increase taxes is untrue.
2.3 million, Supervisor Gould.
Okay. Dyslexia in me is catching up. The other thing, we talked about losing 5 employees this last week. From the email that I saw, I say good riddance to those 5 people. Looked like they were on the way out the door anyway. They're all facing disciplinary hearings when they decided that they would resign. But I just wanted to address that. Thank you, ma'am.
I think I need to respond to that. I never said that we weren't raising your taxes. I said the tax rate. I think by now we all understand how that all works.
No, it was addressing comments of the county manager, not your comment.
Oh, all right. Well,
Comment was
I
regarding
still-
the TNT, which was incorrect also.
okay. All right, so it's anything else for finance? Thank you very much. So now I'm going to ask the elected officials if anyone wants to talk. Who wants to go first? Courts or sheriff? All right, Sheriff Schuster, come on down.
Good morning. Chairperson Angus, members of the board, I'm going to be brief. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to address you. I can tell you this, since I have been in office now, this is my 8th budget, and we've always come in under budget. And I'm not proud of that because we're always under budget due to salary savings. I have impressed upon this board each year that we need more staffing. The population growth has been tremendous. The business growth has been tremendous. And it's very hard, I'm not going to lie, it's very hard for me to come up with a budget request with the assumption there's no money to request. Okay, it's been a very difficult year, and that has nothing to do with any of the board members. It certainly has nothing to do with finance. It's a difficult game. I commend Luke and his staff. They're fantastic, and they put in a tremendous amount of work. I see the frustration. You do have a deficit. I think we can all agree with that. We're spending more now than we're taking in. So how do we fix it? Well, let's just keep relying on the turnover, very much to Sam's point, and maybe next year we'll have more turnover, and then we can have a bigger deficit. We cannot continue to run a budget based on salary deficit. So overall, we tried to limit all of our requests this year. I think I spoke to you all individually about the request for our dispatch needs, and I hope you will honor that in this year's budget. The one thing I have learned is if you want to retain your staff, you've got to pay competitive wage. We compare ourselves to the local cities in a lot of avenues. Well, why do you think we're losing people? There's a lot of elements, but I can promise you pay is the top of the list. Great example, I was down 30 vacancies in the jail, as you know, last year. I came to you, you graciously increased our salary to a fair market wage. I have 0 vacancies today. In 2018, I brought forward a 10-year plan to the board. We were doing great. With your support, first 2 years we accomplished quite a bit. We added some patrol staffing, then COVID hit. And it imploded. And that plan is off the table. Every time I address this board with a need, I try and justify the need, but I also try and offer a solution. I try to put my portion in. We need to increase raises. Okay, well, I will go ahead and freeze these positions to put in a portion of that, knowing that if we don't increase the wages, I'll never fill them anyway. Now we filled those positions at the jail. It's time we start unfreezing the 30-plus positions that we have. So I'd ask you all just to consider that as we go forward, because again, I didn't request that in this year's budget, with the understanding that I didn't know where we'd play out with this year's budget based on the prior year's conversation. Questions?
Any questions for Sheriff Schuster? Supervisor Bishop?
Sheriff, how many positions are you requesting that we unfreeze?
We currently have, Supervisor Bishop, we currently have 30 frozen positions. When I took office in 17, there was, I believe, don't quote me, 8 or 10, and we couldn't get close to that number, so we began freezing additional ones for modest increases, and it didn't help. It did not fix the staffing issue. So once we got the pay up last year, again, thanks to this board, it changed almost overnight. We have a waiting list. We have over 50 people waiting to start work in that jail, and I've got frozen positions that I can't put them into. So it's something worthy of consideration, and long after this budget meeting's over, I would hope you all seriously think about that. Thank you.
So you're fully staffed with positions right now, and you're asking for how many to unfreeze? If you had to put a number on it, I know you'd like all 30, but realistically,
I think historically, not to cut you off, historically I've tried to be very conservative. I've tried to work with the board. I piecemeal my approach. Let's do 5 deputies this year. Let's do, X amount this year. When it comes to detention staff, I would love to see 10 unfrozen this year. But again, it's not in my budget request, and I can't stress to you enough, it's very difficult for me or any other department head or elected official to come up with a budget when we're told don't spend any money. Okay, so I came into this thinking we were upside down as a county. I believe we still are, having listened to Luke, but if we rely on salary savings to carry us forward year after year, we're in big trouble, gang. Those are my thoughts.
Madam Chair.
Elter?
Sheriff, I want to say thank you to you and all of your staff. We've got a really large county to provide law enforcement services for, and you guys do a good job with what you have. Your comments resonate with me. I think that we have to be really wary of short-term thinking that makes us look like a hero today, but perhaps a dunce in 2 or 3 years.
Thank you, Supervisor.
It's short-term thinking, and we need to step away from the short-term thinking and think more medium-term and long-term for the success of this organization.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Supervisor Angus, one
Yes,
more question.
Supervisor
for the
Bishop.
Sheriff. If I support unfreezing 5 deputy positions, would you be able to place more attention to Golden Valley, Dolan Springs, and Meadview with that added personnel?
Supervisor Bishop, I'm not asking for deputy positions. I don't believe I have any. I have 3 frozen deputy positions. We still have, I think, 9 openings, and we're struggling, as is every agency in America, to get applicants that want to do this job. We are looking at some laterals right now, so I think on the deputy side, we're going to be fine. And we do patrol those areas now, and we try and use our resources as best as possible throughout the county. As Supervisor Lingenfelter mentioned, it's a big county. It's a lot of landmass that we have to cover with very little resources. The concern today would be the jail staff, our detention staff. That's where we have the 30 frozen positions, and they're doing great. We're at 100% staffing right now. We might have 1 opening as of recent, but with that 100% staffing, there still needs to be the understanding we're down 30 positions.
Supervisor Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I understood the finance director to say that they were recommending no more hiring freeze. So it sounds to me like you can hire anybody you want.
Supervisor Johnson, and I that's correct. What I'm referring to is the positions that were unfunded, those frozen positions that were unfunded. They need to be funded in order to put them back into active status to fill them.
Nothing? Okay. Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Courts? Judge Moss?
Thank you, Chairman Angus, members of the board, County Manager Elters. I will first state that we appreciate working with Luke, his staff, the county manager. They were very professional. They engaged with us in an open and forthright way, and we managed to address the issues which are a concern to us. And I greatly appreciated being involved in that process. It was one of the more professional processes I've been involved in since my time in county government. I also want to say that I support this budget to the extent my vote counts. It doesn't. And I appreciate everything the board is doing. There are, as Luke went through it, some poison pills that neither the courts nor this board are in control of. There is the probation monies, which by memory is roughly $600,000. Last year, the legislature approved a pay raise, but did a one-time appropriation for it. And now they have to negotiate in their own budget shortfall whether there's going to be a continuing appropriation for that or if they're going to try to shift that to the counties. I've been in contact with all three of our Mojave County legislators, and they've assured me, and I believe them, that they're fighting to get that money. Whether it happens or not, who knows? There are some fragilities within the budget based upon how we did it this year. In order to have our vacancy savings, we don't have any flexibility going forward, or very limited flexibility going forward. That is something of a concern as population is increasing. And that has a direct result in case numbers. Our case numbers are increasing, and our court staff workload is increasing because of that. I believe that I've already did a letter to you last year going through the various years of our work. And this year's numbers show that I think we're a couple hundred cases off our 2019 high. And I expect that we will surpass that by midpoint this year sometime. And so that's of concern. The Census Bureau, I wasn't sure, I didn't hear the number that Luke threw out, but when I looked at the Census Bureau last year, it said by 2030, at 6 years from now, we'll have 250,000 in population in Mojave County at current growth rates. I think last time I checked, we're at 225 ballpark. All of that means that this works for now. What I'm trying to say is the center cannot hold over the medium and long term because of those issues that we are not in control of, population and workload being the big ones. You bring more people, you bring more problems, they bring those problems to the courts. It's just the way it functions right now. But I do appreciate the work staff has done. I do appreciate the engagement on this board and the support the board has shown to the courts and to county departments in general. And I thank you very much for those efforts. I think you've all done amazing work over the last year. And I do greatly appreciate that. If you have any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them.
Any questions for Judge Moss?
I also want to say I'm struggling with a sore throat, which is why I have a mint in my mouth right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any questions for Judge Moss? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I see Matt Smith making his way down. County Attorney.
Good morning, Chairman Angus, our esteemed board, Madam Clerk, Mr. County Manager, Mr. Finance Director. I have made this comment in the past, but I understand the many hats that our Board of Supervisors wears. You have a lot of different responsibilities, and it's actually multiple jobs within one job. You make short-term and long-term decisions that impact the county and the county residents, including planning and zoning decisions every 2 weeks. You are also responsible for making decisions that impact long-term consequences for the county, including water issues among the more serious. You represent your individual constituents, each of you approximately 1/5 of the county. And you are in effect the CEOs of the largest employer in Mojave County. These county employees are dependent for their morale and well-being on the atmosphere and the conditions that are set largely by our county manager and you, our Board of Supervisors. I have to say that some of the comments that I heard concerned me a little bit, and that is that it was almost implied that our county manager and our county finance director were maybe not completely transparent when they projected a possible $18 million deficit for this year. It was absolutely correct. The indication at the time was always that one way or another, we were going to balance the budget for this year. That was my understanding. It was going to balance for this year. But going forward, at the cost of doing that, we were going to have some longer-term problems. And we're still looking at those down the road right now if we don't come up with some type of revenue situation. And as Sheriff Schuster just said, and was indicated previously by Luke Mornian and also Sam Elders,
Can you control that? Well, maybe you can walk outside. Okay? All right.
Thank you. Getting back to what I was saying, it was always the understanding that the budget was going to be balanced, but we don't want to balance the budget on the fact that we have so many vacancies and so many newer employees. Well, one of the issues that our office has is that, not counting, I'll use names, Rod Albright, who worked for us for 20 years, ex-military, JAG Corps, retired, now he's come back to help out. He's just working 2 days a week and he's covering court. So he's not handling trials anymore. Legendary Bob Moon. Bob's now 70 years old, he's still working for us. But he's not taking major cases anymore and he's not doing trials. We're trying to keep him as long as we can. Other than those, not counting myself and James Shotman, our overworked and completely burned out chief deputy, who's a fantastic lawyer, we only have one attorney in our office right now, this is unbelievable to me, that has been there for more than 10 years, that actually handles major cases. Last year, consistent with the population growth that Supervisor Chair Angus has just talked about, we did 103 felony jury trials last year. The previous record in Mojave County, I think, was 75. By comparison, 3 years ago, Coconino County, which is a similarly situated county, was close to the same population numbers. They did 12. Now, their philosophy and maybe their political ideology is a little different than Mojave County, I will grant you that. But 103 felony jury trials last year. Our staff is burned out, and I think the most important thing is just overall morale. And county employees last year were scared. They were nervous, they were worried, and I think Supervisor Gould made mention of this, they were worried about layoffs, they were worried about the long-term financial security of the county, and whether or not there were going to be future layoffs, and whether or not other people were going to quit because of that. And that caused a lot of problems within the county, and it caused problems within our office. We've lost a number of attorneys, and a lot of that was based on morale and their feeling about long-term security. Cameron Pat, maybe some of you have met him, very active locally in politics, was one of our young, promising attorneys, one of the best young ones that we've had in a long time. Started cranking out felony trials when he had been in our office for a very short amount of time, and he was winning consistently. One of the things he did I thought was kind of funny is every time he got a jury verdict, he would text me from the courtroom and tell me what his record was. Cameron ran for city council in Kingman and got elected, and after about 8 or 9 months of being on the council and working for us for 4.5 years, he decided to leave. I had kind of mentored Cameron, and I was surprised by that, and I ended up taking him and his girlfriend out to dinner, and we talked about things, and he said, look, he goes, I'm just too burned out. I'm handling too many cases and too many trials, and there's no end in sight, one right after the other, and I just don't have confidence right now in the political climate and our board right now that going forward, the things are going to be any different and change. And he left and he went to Pinell County. Now, I tell you that story, that's just one isolated story, But that is the type of thing that county employees have been feeling over the course of the past year. Now, the board has done tremendous things, as well as our county manager and our county finance director, to help morale. And those were the three things, the bullet points that were early on in Luke's presentation today, which were the PTO buyback program, which has been tremendously successful and has really, at least the employees that have used that, have been very thankful for that, and it's something that really boosted them up. And then the COLA, and then the performance-based pay, which is something that Supervisor Johnson has really advocated over the years, which is to have pay that's based on performance, it's based on merit. And that is something, these three measures that have been adopted by the county and promulgated by you, the board, have been very helpful. And I think that to some extent, we're paying a competitive wage, but morale is all important. And I just hope that the board continues to realize how valuable our employees are, and that going forward, when our county finance director, our county manager, who are not the type that just cry wolf, say, we have a problem here and we need to do something about it, I hope that the board acts accordingly. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Attorney Smith? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
I would just say thank you for your comments today. I know last year may have had a morale impact negatively on our staff because we had some really tough conversations between our administration and the elected board. But I think that if you look historically, there's been kind of a lack of some necessary tough conversations. And I think that there needs to be some more uncomfortable, tough conversations in the future to make sure that we don't get into a situation where we don't have a lot of alternatives. And we're in a really, really, really bad spot where we have to do something really destructive like layoffs. So I'll take tough conversations every single day of the week over something that we actually have to do.
I actually have a question. So why is it that we have so many more jury trials? I heard, tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, that we even have more than Maricopa County. What is the reason for that?
We don't have more than Maricopa County. We actually did more than Pinal or Pima County last year.
Well, that's what I must have.
Doing more than Pima County to me is just, that's
Yeah.
unbelievable. I do know that we went forward in our county, which is also the leadership of this board. I think we were more, I hate to use the word aggressive, but during COVID and going forward, we did not stop operations like a lot of counties did. We went forward and kept charging. For our example, our office never stopped having grand jury every week. Other places did away with that. They didn't get the grand juries together. They relied on preliminary hearings. As far as the trials go, I think it's a combination of three things maybe. Number one, population growth and more crime, more serious crime. Number two, and maybe that's 2 and 3, our office and also public and legal defender, who are responsible for handling the defense of most of the trials, have less experienced staff. It's exactly what I mentioned before. We don't have people that have been there a long time, and I think that has led to there being more trials than if we had a lot of more experienced attorneys. So I think those are kind of a combination of different things. This year looks like we're going to be less than last year, but still more than any other year that we've ever had before.
See, that's the part of it that is very troublesome, because you don't have the experienced staff to plead these things out, and that's why there's so few. I mean, Coconino is like us not demographically, but size-wise, and they have so much less. And yeah, maybe it's because they're a little more liberal leaning and stuff like that, but it can't all be that. So, that is a very expensive part of your budget, isn't it? Going to these jury trials.
Well, it doesn't impact my budget personally, because our attorneys get paid the same and our staff the same. There's more money involved in subpoenaing and gathering witnesses. Our investigators, a lot of times, picking them up. We had a case today that is going to trial where the victim had gotten run over by a car and decided he didn't want to go to court. And so it's a warrant ended up being arrested, and then we're trying to get that person there right now. That doesn't happen all the time, but Yavapai County, for example, they do almost as many trials as we do. So you need to have a certain amount of trials to keep the system honest, and you want people to have justice. And people do not like plea bargaining as a general rule. So I think doing a lot of trials, and our staff and our court system being very efficient and doing trials is a very good thing. But I do think that I think the sweet spot is somewhere between 70 and 85 trials, and I think that would be a good goal going forward. So
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Who's next? Nobody? Oh. Lydia Durst, County Recorder.
Good morning, Madam Clerk and Clerk of the Supervisors. I really just wanted to give appreciation to the Finance Department for assisting me in my full first budget process. They've been a great help, as well as my executive team, the Chief Deputy Recorder, my records manager, as well as my administrative assistant. Over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of uptick in election bills and mandates. We've always remained in budget with those to complete our election processes and be sure that our voter rolls will remain as clean as they possibly can be. I would like to thank my full-time staff for the continued hard work and dedication in the election integrity, as well as reporting documents to be made of public record and preservation. My capital item request for this budget is a large request, but that is from the surcharge that is funded by recordings of documents, a percentage of every document that's recorded. $4 of that goes into this fund. The fund is created for the purpose of preserving our records, and our current archive writer is outdated and no longer repairable. We purchased it in 2006. It's far beyond its life expectancy. So I thank you all, and I look forward to having a new archive writer in the future.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for our recorder? Thank you, Lydia. Any more elected officials? Okay. Does anybody want to take a break, or should we soldier on?
Keep going.
Okay. Department heads? Any department heads want to speak up? No? Okay, then. Next up on the agenda is the board discussion with staff. Who wants to go first? Anyone have any comments or questions or ideas that they want to bring up now? Yes, Supervisor Bishop.
Thank you. I just would like to discuss a little bit more about the sheriff's request to unfreeze those positions, and the possibility, if the board agrees and feels comfortable with it, the number that we could unfreeze for our sheriff, and whether or not we can afford to put that in the tentative budget and consider it. So with that, I would like to see the sheriff's positions unfrozen. That doesn't mean he's going to fill them all. I don't know if he can fill them all, but I think he should have the opportunity to try to do that, because it's scary having detention officers suffering from burnout or morale issues when they have a job to do that's very dangerous and very stressful.
Right. What would the cost of, what did you say, 5 or 10? 5, 10 be?
Chairman Angus, Supervisor Bishop, I don't have the figure in front of me right now, but what we could certainly do is calculate, what would the cost be per additional detention officer, FTE, and if the board wants us to calculate that for 1 or 5 or 10, we can certainly do that and bring it back as part of the tentative budget proposal on June 3rd.
Does that sound okay to you, Supervisor Bishop?
I would like to see the calculation for both 5 and 10.
We will certainly do that, Supervisor Bishop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments about that? All right, thank you. Supervisor Lingenfelter, have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple. The first I would ask Manager Elters regarding the internal services, IT, financial services, and procurement. As has been mentioned, there's been a significant number of projects that have come through with ARPA. All of those affect financial services and procurement, and you have a very small group of people that are serving the entire organization. No doubt they're burnt out, but that also, knowing that we have a procurement process for formal procurements over a certain dollar amount, and everything that the county does goes through our centralized procurement department. At some point, it's going to slow everything else down as far as the services that we have to get, the commodities that we have to get, aggregate raw materials, fuel. I mean, it runs the gambit really of everything. And I want to ask you, do we have enough people in those internal services that are really representing and serving everybody else in the organization? Do we have enough people to really do what we have to do and make sure that our timelines and our timeframes aren't unnecessarily delayed? That's a judgment call on your part.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Lingenfelter, thank you. I'll say you've selected two interesting departments, and those two departments touch every other department and support every other department. We truly have had challenges in both. I would say we fared a little bit better in the IT department, simply because they have few more people there and they're able to cross-train and delegate. Our procurement department has probably struggled the most, and it's interesting that you mentioned both departments, because just last year we looked at realigning some of those services between these two very departments and brought central services out of IT, put it into procurement, because we felt it would be better suited there. We brought it to the board approved it. They're working together to combine positions and truly realign those duties. But at the same time, as I've mentioned to you, and I think as you have known, our procurement department lost two seasoned individuals that were literally cherry-picked by none other than the state of Arizona procurement department. And our director, with a total of 6 employees, have been trying to replace them and train, and they've done, with herself, her leadership, and the staff that she have done a remarkable job. And with ARPA, Supervisor, as you know, we truly take to heart our responsibility as staff to ensure that the steps are followed. So between procurement and finance, we make sure that we can meet the audit requirements of the federal government. And we have had a lot of projects. You've all taken a very engaged approach to delegating these projects in the communities, and we've taken it to heart to ensure that the process is being followed and on every one of those projects. So to answer your question, those two departments are key, just like every other one. IT invests tremendously in training and cross-training, because we cannot afford to have data breach or to have a problem with our database. So, you singled out two. Allow me to just say every single department and department head understands the responsibility. And when I mentioned earlier, they were disciplined and took to heart the request and the direction. No new initiative unless it's absolutely budget neutral or it's necessary and it's likely for the board to approve. Do not bring it in. So the effort is real and genuine, and I don't want to ramble, but I want to try to answer your question to the best of my ability. We're doing the best with what we have. It has not been easy, and the effort that our staff makes day in and day out is truly fantastic, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them. I'll end with this. Our staff is trained, skilled, and valuable, and they're being noticed by other public entities and private sector, and that's why we're losing many of them to other, from Maricopa County to City of Kingman and others. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that finance and procurement are really tied together, and I think it'd be great to have either. We heard that maybe financial services might be getting another employee. I think that it would be appropriate to either get procurement, some temporary staff, or another procurement officer, at least in the short term, to get them through all these ARPA projects. And once you get those all finished, maybe you can go back to a smaller staff. And that's the only comment I have on that. I have one more comment towards the county manager, if I may. And it's regarding economic development. In looking through the budget, it looks like we're increasing that budget an approximate $90,000. Is that accurate? And then it looks like I should wait to answer. You should answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Lingenfelter, I don't have the number exactly in my head. If you say it's 90, I take your word for it. What we're trying to do with economic development is another department that is very small, and we've experienced departures there as well today, Madam Chair and Supervisor Lingenfelter. There's one person in that department, and we're trying to look ahead and do some succession planning by filling one position that is already there and having a part-time one that we can test, train, equip, and hopefully position to turn into put into a full-time position. Supervisor Lingenfelter, as you know, we have seasoned department heads. Some of them have future plans. Some include retirements, and we're trying to keep that in mind as well. So as far as economic development is concerned, that is the reason for the $90K that you referenced. If I may, on the procurement side, if the board approves one additional position, which we did not ask for, I can tell you the department head of that department would be grateful. She puts in a lot of hours, and her deputy does too, and I would be very grateful as well.
If I may, Manager Elters, either your financial services director or your economic development director, I'd like to ask, in the budget, there's a list of it says programs. I'd like to know what is being funded or being proposed to be funded.
Would you be so kind just to repeat that? I think I got
Yeah, so in the budget, this is maybe page on the electronic version 583 of 1423. It says program. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what we're funding under economic development. And the reason I'm bringing up economic development is because we're talking about these budget deficits, right? The reason that Mojave County has an economic development department is because we're trying to broaden and strengthen our existing tax base and our jobs base. That's what they do. And there's two schools of that, right? You either focus all on attraction, and you try to get these big companies come in a super competitive environment, and it's really, really expensive, or you do what they call, I mean, you've heard economic gardening or things like that, where you're looking at current resident stage 1, stage 2 businesses and retention and expansion. Because when you look at the data in Mojave County, like 98% or more of our business establishments in this county are stage 1 and stage 2, 99 employees or less. And they're the primary property tax generators, they're the primary capital investment generators, they're the primary job creators. But we don't seem, in my opinion, to focus on them. And it's a lot less expensive to grow the businesses that you have that are already here and to accomplish a broader tax base and more jobs than it is to go out there and spend a bunch of money to try to attract new companies to come in and ignore the ones that are here. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. What are we funding? What are we focused on?
Tammy.
Tammy,
Chairman.
our Economic Development Director.
Yeah, Chairman,
Thank you.
Supervisors. There are 3 areas that are programs, and that is true. One is for current attraction, one is for business retention expansion, the other is for tourism. And so those are all, we separated them. They were not able to label them specifically in the budget, but that's what they're for. They're specifically to work on bringing in additional business, supporting the local businesses so that they can not only stay here, but grow and focus on tourism, which should bring in more tax base as well.
What sort of things are you doing for business retention and expansion proposed under this budget? Just so I get an understanding of it.
There's several things that we work on. I have to have staff to be able to go out and work with the local businesses, but even with what I have and being by myself, I've been able to help businesses to change direction, to give them the resources that they need to look beyond what they're doing today, and to, as well as not only bringing in more programs or maybe market differently, but also what they can do to retain their employees, because they have the same problem that we're having in the county. So can they create new programs that are going to retain their employees better? And I've gone in several companies that their turnover, one company, the turnover was 70-some%. And after working with them for over a year, they were able to make their turnover down to less than 20%. And so that saves a lot of money for the businesses. So it's just working with them individually. Creating training programs right now. We're creating some training programs. One of the training programs I'm putting together, and I need to find some grant money to help put it together completely. But I've got a customer service program that I put together that can be used with all of the businesses in the county for free, 1 to 2 hours only, where the employees are going to understand what good, strong customer service is and be able to then help those businesses to become more productive. So some of it's working with those businesses one-on-one. Some of it's creating programs that businesses can use to help them, assist them.
I think that's important. I'm in the camp of growing your economy from the inside out. It's a lot cheaper. That's where the majority of our property tax revenue comes from businesses, and our job growth comes from those businesses. And to have certain programs or established programs that help stage 1 businesses go to a stage 2, or a stage 2 business go to a stage 3. I mean, that's really where the value is, I think. And I'd love to see more of that. The only other thing I would say is tourism is a little bit of a stretch to me. Maybe people come here and they buy or a business, or they invest in a business, and that's valid. But without a sales tax, I mean, we're just helping the cities.
So, and you're right, we're helping the cities, but at the same time, what I've done, and I've got a small budget for tourism, but what I've done is started to bring together businesses within the county. So they may be in the city, they may be in the unincorporated parts of the county, but we're bringing them together to meet, to see how we can work together. In the process, what's happened is I have businesses that are wanting to come here because of that. So they may be tourism businesses, but they're wanting to come here, have employees, and grow the economy. So it really is going both ways. One of the things I'm working on right now is bringing in, I've got an RV company they want to just bring in an RV place, but they want to make it different. So we've talked about how we can make the Route 66 theme and incorporate that, bring in some amusement park type things, small little rides and things within that RV park, so that they're going to be seen. They're going to be able to have over 20 employees. That's pretty big for a small little community that they're going to.
Great. And the last question is, the foreign trade zone establishment is still going forward
It
with
is
this budget?
definitely going forward.
Great. That's a really important initiative. Thank you for answering all my questions.
Any other questions? Supervisor Bishop?
Yeah, since we have our economic development at the podium, how many employees do you have, and how do you project your need to be going forward?
I currently have 0 employees. I work by myself. I have an office assistant that I'm interviewing for on Thursday. We've interviewed a few before and we were not able to find anyone to fill that position. So I'm hoping we'll find one on Thursday. And then I put in for a part-time person that would come in and be able to work on specifically business retention and expansion for our local businesses. And with that person and with that position, working with a different grant, I'm hoping that that grant comes through and that would fund the person to go full-time. So it wouldn't be general fund for that person. It would be a full-time. It would just be part-time general fund.
Okay, so right now it's just you and a part-time assistant.
Well, right now it's just me until we can get somebody hired.
Okay, that's amazing, because I know you work really, really hard and do a lot of traveling in your job. So
We've had to cut that back also. So
certainly understand that, and wish you well going forward. And should you ever have the need for more help, make sure that you let us know.
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Chairman Angus, in response to Supervisor Bishop's question, we've been sitting over here crunching some numbers. So with regards to the adult detention center, if we were to bring on or unfreeze and fund 5 additional detention officer positions, and this would be at the starting wage of $25.97 an hour, that would cost approximately $378,000 a year, and that's salary plus benefits. 10 would be $756,000, and I think we could probably come to some sort of accommodation with the sheriff as well. He has $600,000 budgeted in overtime for the detention center next year. I would expect that, you know, if you bring on 10 additional staff members or even 5 additional staff members, that I would hope that that overtime budget could be reduced somewhat as a result of that, with a significant extra, additional number of man hours. And then as far as procurement goes, an additional procurement officer full-time, and this is at a starting wage of $22.37 an hour, would cost approximately $67,000 to the county. And because of where we are at in the budget process, those costs for procurement usually get allocated out to the various departments, but because of where we're at, we would have to have the general fund basically eat that cost for fiscal 25, and then in fiscal 26 they could charge that out. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I think the thought was to fund an additional position during the ARPA process, and the ARPA will be done at the end of 2024.
So,
real quick, Madam Chair and Supervisor Bishop, ARPA allocation and programming will be done in 24, but the expenditure period continues until the end of 26.
Okay.
So December of 26.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if this is going to mean anything, but I'm almost at, like Supervisor Bishop was talking about the board meeting yesterday, I'm almost at the end of my allotment as well, and I think I'm going to have about $70,000 less. Can I turn that over for this purpose to take care of the longer lasting
effects in procurement.
Madam Chair, I will be happy to explore that idea. As you know, with every funding project, we run it by the county attorney's office to ensure that's ineligible. I'll be more than happy to explore that and come back to you. If it's ineligible, we would be very grateful for that.
We've done something like that before, because I believe we gave a little money for administration early on.
Indeed, you have.
Okay.
Indeed,
Well,
you
just
have.
let me know. Anyone else? That's the end of the agenda. Is there any other comments or anything anyone wants to bring up? Supervisor Bishop?
Since we've talked about ARPA funding a little bit, I'm just curious whether or not ARPA funding could help fund some of these positions, because they obviously are a direct result of the COVID pandemic. Some of the supervisors that have money left may want to fund a position for a year, 2 years. Just throwing it out there.
Yes.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Bishop, just two things to keep in mind with ARPA funding and funding positions is ARPA funding is of limited nature. It has to be allocated by the end of this year, and it only runs through 2026. After that, it would have to be picked up. Either of those positions would have to be eliminated or would have to be funded through the general fund.
Well, did you just say that this would be for temporary workers through the ARPA process? That's all. I'm not looking for ongoing, just trying to come up with something to help out.
Madam Chair, absolutely. The funding that District 2 and District 4 put toward administrative is still being used for that. And just so you know, what we're using it for are individuals that meet track projects in various departments. It's not the funding is not going to every individual in a department, but the individuals that put hours on these projects. So procurement, finance,
We'll
and
just
others.
talk about it
Yeah.
another time. Okay. Anyone else? Could that possibly be it? Anyone? All right. We'll be talking about this in the month ahead.